A single bolt of lightning sliced open the night sky, illuminating a desperate woman clutching her ruined designer coat, stranded on a road at the edge of nowhere. Rain hammered mercilessly onto fields that once promised hope, now drowning in debt, in quiet despair. 60 days, that was all the bank had given him. 60 days before his family's legacy vanished, piece by painful piece, into cold legal jargon. She was running from a life of glittering lies, he from a truth too bitter to face alone. Neither knew their paths were about to cross, or that their collision would ignite a fight for survival greater than either had imagined. In a place where tradition fights progress, and silence hides scars as deep as the land itself, a storm was gathering. And when it finally broke, nothing, no secrets, no regrets, no broken dreams would be left untouched. Peter Caldwell's farm stretched across 3 generations of blood, sweat, and history in the heart of Willowbend County. On a typical summer evening, the horizon would be painted with gentle pastels, and the cicadas would sing in the tall grass. But tonight the world seemed cast in relentless gray. The rain hammered down so fiercely that the tree line dissolved into a blur beyond the gravel road. Water pooled in the low spots on the farm's long driveway, reflecting the somber sky. At 40 years old, Peter had once believed that if he simply worked hard enough and stuck to honest principles, he would never lose this land that his grandfather had painstakingly carved from the wilderness. Now, a crumpled notice in his glove compartment declared otherwise. He had exactly 60 days to bring his loan current or face foreclosure. He'd reread that letter so many times he could recite every ruthless line, from the polite salutation to the final, unnerving signature of the bank's regional manager. Despite his broad shoulders and calloused hands, evidence of a man who had served in the Army Reserve before returning home, Peter couldn't stop his gut from twisting into knots. The farm had weathered hailstorms, droughts, and plagues of insects. But it had never been threatened quite like this by the cold calculation of financial institutions. Evening was pressing in, and Peter's old Ford pickup grumbled along the county road, its windshield wipers flailing against the downpour. Shadows crept across the fields, turning the wheat tips into an indistinct mass. The foreboding storm underlined his own personal tempest, bills stacking higher than the silos, unfulfilled equipment loans, and that ticking clock giving him just 2 short months to find a miracle. Lightning sliced the sky, momentarily illuminating the deserted road. That was when he spotted something unusual, a small luxury sedan on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly in the sheets of rain. As Peter slowed down, he could make out a faint silhouette, someone standing beside the car with an umbrella turned inside out by the wind. Ordinarily, he might have driven on, mindful of potential dangers in picking up strangers, but this storm was vicious, and he wasn't the sort to leave anyone stranded. Besides, he remembered the time, years ago, when an older farmer helped him fix a flat tire at 2 in the morning on a similar road. Passing on that kindness felt like the right thing. Pulling over, he left the engine running and rolled down the passenger window. Water immediately sprayed in. "Everything okay?" he called out, raising his voice above the deluge. The person turned, revealing the shape of a woman, her hair plastered against her face. She clutched what looked like an expensive handbag close to her body. Even from a distance, Peter registered the incongruence: a luxurious coat, high-heeled boots ill-suited for rain, and a complexion too polished for Willowbend's typical scenery of dirt-caked laborers. "My car died," she shouted, her accent crisp with a refined edge. "And there's no signal. Could you please help me find some place to stay?" It wasn't lost on him that Willowbend County's cell service often failed, especially during storms. Peter leaned across the seat, shoving aside feed invoices. "I can give you a ride," he said, not sure about accommodations. "Though, town's got one motel, and it's usually half shut." She eyed him warily but with palpable relief. "I'd be grateful," she replied. "Name's Peter," he called, pushing open the passenger door. "Peter Caldwell." She paused, then gave a courteous nod. "Camilla Addison," she said, shivering as she climbed in, dragging her soaked handbag with her. In that moment, the swirl of storm water, the oppressive threat of foreclosure, and the arrival of a mysterious stranger converged on Peter's world. Little did he suspect that this rain-lashed encounter would set into motion a series of events capable of reshaping both his faltering farm and Camilla's hidden life. The sound of the rain drummed on the truck's metal roof like rolling marbles. Inside the cab, the air was thick with humidity and the faint scent of hay that clung to Peter's work jacket. Camilla tried to shake off the excess water from her coat, but it was no use. She was drenched, her usually neat hair plastered against her cheeks. As the old pickup rumbled back onto the road, water sluiced from the windshield in frantic arcs. Peter squinted through the downpour, managing the steering wheel with the calm of a man who had navigated countless storms. "That fancy car of yours won't be going anywhere until morning," he said, eyeing the rear view to confirm it was safe to merge back onto the lonely stretch. "Car battery? Maybe something else, I'm not sure," Camilla replied, pushing wet strands from her forehead. "I must have taken a wrong turn off the highway." By the time I realized my mistake, the engine started sputtering. She paused, trying to regain composure. "I'm sorry to trouble you like this." He shook his head. "No trouble. Storms this fierce can rattle the best of us. Folks around here help each other out." Camilla studied his profile. High cheekbones, a day's worth of stubble, and a fatigued stoicism in those blue eyes. His hands, gripping the wheel, bore small scars and calluses. A man who'd seen real work and maybe more. She glanced at the clutter on the dashboard, a stack of old receipts, an Army Reserve patch, and a battered photograph of an older couple in front of a big red barn. Her stomach twisted with uncertainty. She'd told him only her name and abbreviation, really Camilla Addison, which was close enough to the real one plastered across global fashion magazines. Technically, she was Camilla Addison St. Clair, but after so many years in Paris, the name had become synonymous with runway shows, high-profile collaborations, and penthouse apartments. Now, that image was the last thing she wanted to carry around. She'd fled the city under a hail of paparazzi rumors, boardroom bickering, and her own creative burnout. On a whim, she'd flown stateside. She thought she could vanish, rediscover something genuine, but here she was, half lost in rural America, rescued by a man who wore his worn optimism like a second skin. As if sensing her introspection, Peter spoke up. "Not many folks pass through Willow Bend on purpose," he said gently. "You traveling alone?" She forced a small smile. "Yes, I needed some distance from everything. I was on my way to a quieter place, hoping for a bit of solitude." He nodded, sympathy flickering across his eyes. "I get that. Sometimes distance is the only thing that keeps you sane." The storm raged outside, turning country roads into shallow creeks. Lightning flashed, illuminating fields of grain and rows of neglected farmland. In the short distance, Camilla caught sight of dilapidated barns, shuttered diners, and the flickering neon of what might have been a fuel station. The entire region felt stuck in time, battered by forces bigger than itself, much like the occupant behind the wheel. She mused. "You can stay at my place for the night," Peter offered after a moment. "I've got a guest cottage behind the main farmhouse. It's nothing fancy, but it's dry, and it beats sleeping in your car." Camilla felt an odd sense of relief. "I don't want to be an imposition," she said, though the shiver in her voice betrayed how cold she actually felt. He offered a reassuring nod, eyes on the road. "Trust me, I'd want someone to do the same if my sister or mother were stranded. We're a small community here, but we take care of our own and occasionally a stranger." Stranger. The word rang in her head. She was indeed a stranger in this place, burdened by secrets she wasn't ready to share. Watching the passing shadows, Camilla wondered if her impulsive flight from Paris might actually lead her somewhere better. The beep of a low-fuel light refocused Peter's attention. They still had a mile or two before hitting the farm. Camilla pressed back against the old seat, feeling the weight of exhaustion. Perhaps the quiet of Willow Bend County was exactly what she needed. She glanced at Peter's strong hands once more, uncertain of his own private storm. They both had troubles, no doubt, and as the truck bumped along the muddy path, She had no inkling that their troubles were about to collide and, in some miraculous way, might just cancel each other out. The rickety porch light struggled against the torrent of rain as Peter pulled his truck to a stop in front of a two-story farmhouse. Even in darkness, Camilla noticed the once bright paint was peeling, and the gutters sagged a bit, yet an inviting glow shone from the windows, illuminating a wide porch stacked with crates of produce and garden tools. As Peter killed the engine, a fleeting lull in the rain allowed them to dash up the steps. "Come on," Peter beckoned, opening the front door. Inside, the house felt like an homage to a bygone era. The living room boasted scuffed hardwood floors, a large stone fireplace, and family photos that lined the walls, pictures of birthdays, of harvest celebrations, and of a younger Peter in uniform, his face set with determination. The air smelled faintly of spiced apples and worn leather, a comforting aroma that contrasted sharply with Camilla's usual environment of polished marble and expensive perfumes. She stood there, dripping onto the doormat, struck by how long it had been since she'd set foot in a genuine family home. Her penthouse in Paris felt more like a showpiece than a residence. Peter grabbed some towels from a closet, offering them to her apologetically. "Here," he said. "Sorry if they smell a bit like the outdoors. Everything's been a little damp since last week's storm." Camilla wrapped the towel around herself, nodding her thanks. "It's fine. It's warm in here, at least warmer than outside." Peter kicked off his muddy boots, making sure not to track more water into the house. "I should show you to the guest cottage," he said, glancing out the window to gauge if the rain had fully let up. He paused, as though weighing a decision, and turned to her. "Actually, do you want something hot to drink before we cross the yard again? Storm might pick back up any minute." She caught herself in the middle of a yawn, nodded gratefully. "Yes, please, if it's not too much trouble." While he busied himself in the kitchen, she took in more details of the home. Framed on the mantel was a photo of an older man, presumably Peter's father, in the same farmland setting, arm around a smiling woman. Next to it was a folded American flag in a triangular case, and on the stone fireplace hung a set of dog tags. She couldn't help but wonder if that was related to his military service. By the time she wandered into the kitchen, the kettle was whistling on a stove that looked older than either of them. The tile counter showed signs of repeated repairs, and a handwritten calendar hung on the wall, marking planting schedules, payment due dates, and scribbled reminders in thick black marker. She noticed a day circled in red ink just under 2 months from now, with the simple note, "Final notice." A pang of curiosity rose. Peter set a mug of tea in front of her. "Chamomile? Don't have much else." He tried for a small grin, but fatigue weighed on him too. "Hope that's okay." "It's perfect," she replied softly, pressing her hands to the warm ceramic. She took a cautious sip, grateful for its steadying effect. "Thank you." He slid into the seat across from her, bracing his arms on the table. In the overhead light, the lines of worry etched on his face became more evident. She recalled the battered notice in his truck and the red-circled date on the calendar. She recognized desperation had felt it often enough herself, though she had spent the past few years surrounded by opulence. She knew deep down how quickly things could be taken away. "Once you've dried off a bit, I'll show you out back," he said, clearing his throat. "Won't be fancy, but it's got clean sheets. Tomorrow morning, if you want, we can see about towing your car and figuring out your next steps." Camilla swallowed, her gaze drifting to a cluster of envelopes on the table, many marked with bold red stamps. She decided not to pry just yet. "Thank you," she said again, meaning it. Outside, another rumble of thunder reminded her they weren't out of the storm's grasp, but for the moment she had found a small refuge and possibly, so had he. The cottage was no more than 50 yards from the main house, but the walk there felt like an obstacle course, thanks to slick mud and puddles that threatened to swallow their shoes. Peter carried a lantern to guide the way, keeping a close watch to ensure Camilla didn't slip. The structure itself looked like it had once been a storage shed or a caretaker's cabin, converted into a modest guest space. The siding needed a fresh coat of paint, but a faint lamplight glowed through the curtained window, and wild vines crept up the side, giving it a certain rustic charm. "There's a space heater inside," Peter said, unlocking the door with an old key. "I got the electricity working it a few months back. So you'll have lights. Hot water, maybe just give it a minute to warm up." Camilla stepped in, water dripping from her coat, and immediately noted the cedar walls that lent the small room a subtle, pleasant aroma. A worn but clean quilt was spread across a twin bed. On a side table sat a small lamp, next to a single chair with cushions that seemed homemade. A tiny kitchenette in the corner boasted just enough space for a sink, a mini fridge, and a stovetop that had seen better days. She set her handbag on the chair, turning to face Peter, who hesitated in the doorway. "Is it acceptable?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern that she might find it too rustic. "It's wonderful," she reassured him, feeling a genuine sense of relief. After the chaos she had fled from in her life, this simple cottage felt like a sanctuary. She removed her coat, now heavy with rain, and draped it over the edge of the bed. "I really appreciate this." He nodded, unsmiling but cordial. "Well, if you need anything, I'll be over at the main house. I'm up at 5 most mornings. You can come by any time." She lingered for a second, noticing how his eyes flicked around the cottage, as if he were silently apologizing for its humble state. "Peter," she said softly, "thank you." Their gazes met, and she thought she saw a flicker of warmth in his otherwise guarded expression. "Get some rest." "Camilla," he said at last, switching on the little lamp. "Night." When he left, closing the door gently behind him, she exhaled. In the stillness, she heard the remaining drops of rain tapping on the roof. Part of her wanted to draw a long bath, rinse the day's tension away, yet the cottage had no tub, just a shower stall. Instead, she flipped through her handbag, retrieving a tablet, a sketchbook, and her phone. No signal, as expected. Sighing, she powered down the phone. She was free, at least momentarily, from the calls of her agent, her business partner, and the board members who relentlessly demanded new collections, new ideas, new everything. She opened her sketchbook, half wondering if the muse might return in this quiet. For a moment, the blank page stared back, mocking her. She felt an old familiar anxiety clutch her chest. She had not truly designed anything from the heart in over a year. Each runway piece in Paris had been more a product of commerce than creativity. Now, in the solitude of a humble farm cottage, she might rediscover the spark that made her name a staple in high-fashion circles. But as lightning flashed outside, she closed the notebook again. She needed sleep more than anything. Laying back on the bed, she pulled the quilt over her, inhaling the faint scent of lavender that clung to the fabric. The storm had begun to wane, and the gentle patter of rain soothed her. In that soft darkness, her thoughts drifted to the man who had taken her in. He carried burdens, just like she did, and something about the stoic sadness in his eyes touched her more than any Paris runway applause ever had. She slept without dreams, lulled by the quiet possibility that tomorrow might bring a new beginning. Peter rose before dawn, as he always did, compelled by years of discipline, first from his upbringing, then from his military service. Outside, the clouds had thinned, leaving trails of dew across the fields. Within the house, he brewed a pot of coffee and scarfed down a piece of toast. There was too much to do, and time never seemed to stretch far enough. His routine included a quick inventory of feed for the animals he still kept, though the stock was smaller than it had been in the farm's heyday. He used to have a small herd of dairy cows, but financial strains forced him to sell most. Now he had a few goats, half a dozen chickens, and an aging horse named Duchess, who neighed at him as if to demand a morning greeting. With so many obligations, a normal man might ignore the presence of a stranger sleeping in his guest cottage. But Peter was not a normal man. Duty, discipline, and decency were ingrained into his character. Before 7, he walked to the cottage. He found the door ajar, revealing Camilla, already up, standing at the small stove with water simmering in a kettle. She wore a borrowed flannel shirt over her sleek black trousers, an odd combination that made him grin inwardly. Morning, he said, tapping lightly on the doorframe. She turned, startled at first, then offered a cautious smile. I wasn't sure where to find breakfast, so I thought I'd just make some tea. Plenty of coffee back in the main house. But tea works too. He stepped inside, noticing she'd tidied the small space. I can run you into town if you want. Might get your car towed so a mechanic can have a look. That would be great, she replied, picking up the cup of tea. I really appreciate all this. Are you sure it's okay for me to stay another night while the car gets fixed? He nodded. I'm sure. No sense rushing you out in the shape your car's in. At least let me see if old Bill in down at the station can help with a decent tow. They shared a subdued moment as sunlight began spilling through the single window, illuminating the dust motes in the air. Camilla studied Peter's face more carefully. He appeared a bit younger in daylight, the early lines around his eyes suggesting the weight of worry rather than age. I noticed your schedule pinned up in the house, she said tentatively. Lot of tasks for one man. He shrugged, trying to brush it off. I manage. She wasn't done. And the envelope on your table, final notice if I'm overstepping. Just tell me. Her voice held genuine concern. Peter inhaled, staring at the swirling steam in her mug. He wasn't sure why, but something in her tone prompted honesty. Maybe it was because she, too, seemed to carry secrets. I owe the bank more than I can scrape together, he admitted softly. $50,000 behind on a farm loan that's ballooned. I've got 60 days to pay or they'll foreclose. Camilla set the mug down, gently. That's, that's terrible, she said, searching his eyes. This farm looks like it's been in your family a long time. 3 generations, he confirmed. Grandfather started it after World War II. Dad expanded it. I tried to modernize, but costs rose, yields didn't. I guess I wasn't as good at the business side as I thought. She could see the heaviness in the slump of his shoulders. She recalled the times her own empire nearly slipped away due to boardroom battles and market shifts. Maybe we'll think of something, she said quietly. Not knowing how, but feeling compelled. He didn't respond. Instead, he gestured out the door. If you're ready, let's get to town. Best do it before Bill closes up early. Stepping outside, they saw that the storm had washed the world clean. The sky was a sharp blue, the earth fresh with possibility. Camilla followed Peter to the truck, though neither realized that in their quest to fix one broken car, they were beginning a journey that might also rescue a broken farm and maybe each other. Town was hardly more than a handful of buildings arranged around a single main street. An old-fashioned gas station, a diner named Millie's Place, a corner store, and a post office lined the dusty pavement. A large brick structure that once housed the county bank stood vacant, windows boarded up, a testament to the economic decline that Willow Bend had been nursing for years. As Peter pulled the truck up to the lone auto shop, Camilla surveyed the surroundings with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. She noticed more shuttered windows than open storefronts. People on the sidewalks were mostly older folks, wearing worn clothes, peering at her as if she were some exotic creature. She felt self-conscious about her city attire. Even though she wore the flannel shirt over it, Old Bill turned out to be a barrel-chested man with grease-stained hands and an easy grin. Peter Caldwell, he said by way of greeting. Figured I'd see you soon, what with that rattle in the back of your truck. Or is this a social call? It's my friend here, Peter explained. Stepping out of the truck, her car broke down on County Road 16 last night. Think you can haul it in? Bill tipped his cap. Sure can. Just point me to it. You got the keys? Miss Camilla nodded and handed them over, grateful for the friendly efficiency. Thank you. Whatever it costs, I'll pay. Bill shrugged. We'll see what's wrong first. Might not be too bad. While Bill prepared his tow truck, Peter guided Camilla toward the diner, ignoring the curious glances from a pair of onlookers who muttered something under their breath, likely about the expensive, mud-stained boots she was wearing. Inside Millie's Place, the smell of bacon, coffee, and frying onions enveloped them. It was busy for a small town diner, filled with farmers, truckers, and a few tourists heading to destinations beyond Willow Bend. They slipped into a booth, and a middle-aged waitress with a kind smile approached. "Morning, Peter," she greeted warmly. Scribbling on her notepad, the usual Peter nodded. "Yes, please. And whatever the lady wants." Camilla glanced at the menu, noticing plain but hearty dishes. She ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. As the waitress left, she looked at Peter. "You know everyone here, don't you?" He gave a short laugh. "Mostly. Guess folks can't keep secrets in a small town. Everyone's business is everyone else's." Camilla stirred sugar into her coffee. "That sounds both comforting and suffocating," she mused. "Yeah, that's about right. The place is dying, though," he added, glancing at the line of vacant shops across the street. "Used to be more jobs, more kids running around. Now, it's mostly older folks and a few families hanging on. The rest left for the city." She pursed her lips. "Is that why the bank closed?" "Partly when the regional branch was losing money, so they consolidated. Now people have to drive 30 miles just to deposit a check." Their waitress returned with plates of eggs, bacon, and toast. Camilla inhaled the comforting aroma, realizing she was hungrier than she thought. As they began to eat, conversation drifted to her car troubles, then circled around to the farm. She kept an eye on Peter's expression, trying to gauge how much the foreclosure weighed on him. She caught glimpses of a forced bravery that masked deeper pain. "It's not your problem," he remarked suddenly, catching her studying him. "I mean, I appreciate the sympathy, but I know you've got your own worries." She hesitated, debating whether to divulge her own secrets. "Let's just say I ran away from a storm bigger than the one last night," she replied cryptically. "Sometimes you need to drive until you can't anymore, just to remember who you are." Peter's gaze softened. "That's exactly it, isn't it?" he said. "You try so hard to hold everything together. Then one day you realize maybe you need to let it fall apart for a bit, figure out if it's worth rebuilding." She nodded, impressed by his insight. Before she could respond, Bill poked his head through the diner door, waved them over. The car was on its way to the shop. They stood to leave, both feeling the subtle shift in their connection, a mutual empathy that was steadily forming, anchored by the recognition that they each carried burdens too heavy to bear alone. By late afternoon, the sun blazed overhead, causing heat to shimmer off the pavement outside Bill's auto shop. Camilla's car diagnosis came back with good news and bad news. The good news, the engine was mostly intact. The bad news, the alternator and battery were shot, and a specialized part for her luxury import would need to be ordered. It could take a few days to arrive. "It's not the simplest fix," Bill apologized, wiping sweat from his brow. "But I'll get you running again soon enough." Camilla thanked him, privately relieved she wouldn't have to rush off. While the indefinite delay might have been an inconvenience in her old world, part of her welcomed the excuse to stay on the farm a bit longer. She and Peter hopped back in his truck and headed home, a comfortable silence between them. Halfway down the gravel road, he turned to her. "We're having a potluck tonight at the community center. Nothing fancy, just neighbors and families. You're welcome to come, if you don't mind small town gatherings." She blinked, surprised by the invitation. "I sure." She agreed. "I'd like that." Peter offered a faint smile, returning his focus to the dusty path ahead. As they arrived back at the farm, Camilla returned to the cottage to freshen up while Peter did his afternoon chores. She found herself rummaging through her suitcase, which contained mostly stylish outfits ill-suited for rural life. She picked a simple blouse and jeans, silently hoping she wouldn't stand out too much. Dusk approached, painting the sky in gold and violet streaks. Camilla followed Peter into his truck once more, and they drove a short distance to a small, time-worn building on the edge of town with a fading sign, Willow Bend Community Hall. Inside, folding tables were pushed together, laden with casseroles, fried chicken, cornbread, and various homemade pies. The chatter of voices mingled with the gentle strains of a local fiddler in the corner. Peter introduced her around. Many recognized him from childhood or from his father's days in county leadership. A few shot glances at Camilla's polished manner, but most were welcoming enough, offering polite nods or quick handshakes. A plump woman with a grin that didn't quit approached them. Peter Caldwell. I hear there's a new face in town, she teased, elbowing him. You must be Camilla. Camilla returned the woman's grin. Yes. Lovely to meet you. I'm Mary Archer. I was friends with Peter's mother. Goodness, we've watched him grow since he was in diapers. She winked at him, then turned back to Camilla. Come get a plate before it's all gone. They found seats at a long table. Camilla sampled the local dishes, savoring the hearty flavors. It was a far cry from the haute cuisine she was used to, but it tasted comforting. She observed the animated chatter older men trading stories about crop yields, young mothers juggling toddlers, and a small group of veterans in a corner wearing caps that declared their branch of service. Occasionally, people glanced at her, curiosity evident. She realized that in this little world, every outsider was cause for speculation. Peter explained that events like these were about community support, sharing a meal, sharing news, and sometimes raising funds for a neighbor in need. As the evening wore on, talk shifted to the challenges facing Willow Bend, shuttered businesses, farmland consolidation, and the city folks who bought up properties only to leave them idle. When Mary Archer made an announcement about a raffle to help a local family behind on mortgage payments, Camilla felt Peter stiffen beside her. She saw the flush creep up his neck and realized they were talking about him, in code. The raffle collected a decent sum, but it was a drop in the bucket compared to what the bank demanded. After the potluck ended, a handful of neighbors lingered to chat. Mary embraced Peter, murmuring something about not giving up. He gave a tight smile, changing the subject. When they finally drove off, the star-strewn sky blanketed the silent farmland, and Camilla's heart ached with empathy. This man was being propped up by a community that didn't have much themselves, yet they were all trying. That night, back at the cottage, she stared at her sketchbook again. Something about the raw authenticity of Willow Bend stirred her imagination. She started drawing the outline of a jacket, the patterns reminiscent of farmland rows. But halfway through, she paused, uncertain if she had the right to weave these people's struggles into her work. Setting the pencil aside, she resolved that if she was going to create again, it had to be out of respect, not exploitation. She thought of Peter's resolute spirit and realized that perhaps for the first time in ages she had found a muse worth honoring. The next day dawned bright, offering a much calmer sky than before. Camilla woke up early and decided to explore the farm while Peter was off feeding the animals. The cottage door creaked as she stepped onto the small porch. Morning mist hovered low over the fields, and dew sparkled on the wild grass. A sense of possibility filled her lungs. She navigated a footpath that led around the side of the main house. Rows of vegetables caught her eye, different shades of green, with splashes of color from heirloom tomatoes, peppers, and blossoms that beckoned pollinators. She noticed a small fenced garden with climbing beanstalks that boasted purple-streaked pods, and she recalled reading somewhere about older, heritage varieties that had more flavor and unique patterns than commercial hybrids. Suddenly, she heard a distant call. Turning, she saw Peter in a field behind a row of modest grain silos, beckoning her over. Drawing closer, she stepped carefully on the soft earth until she reached him. He stood with a shovel, investigating the soil around a row of carrots, seemingly lost in thought. His dog, a spry border collie named Molly, sniffed around his boots. Morning, Camilla greeted, noticing the streak of dirt across his brow. He stood, nodding. Morning. Thought you might still be asleep. I couldn't, she said, drinking in the fresh air. It's beautiful here. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Yeah, it is. He conceded. When I was a kid, I used to hate waking up early to do chores. But you learn to appreciate the quiet and the sense of purpose. She peered at the carrots, noticing they weren't the standard orange. Some had a deep purple hue at the top, blending into orange near the tip. What kind are these heirloom variety? He explained, wiping sweat from his forehead. It's called Purple Sun. My granddad experimented with a whole bunch of older seeds. Always said the mass-produced stuff lost the flavors of the past. Camilla gently touched one of the carrot tops, seeing how vibrant and unique they were. Something about these vegetables reminded her of haute couture, each piece with its own subtle difference, each carrying a story. "They're beautiful," she murmured. Peter chuckled. "Never thought of carrots as beautiful. But okay." She gave him a sidelong glance. "Beauty's not just about glamour, It's presence, uniqueness, history, all of that." He leaned on his shovel. "Speaking of history, got a whole row of tomatoes over there. Seeds come from my grandmother's side, Italian immigrants who settled in the Midwest ages ago. They're prone to blemishes. Not exactly pretty to the untrained eye, but the taste is unmatched. If I could get them into the right markets, maybe I could charge more. People want something authentic these days, but it's tough. Shipping costs, marketing, not to mention the bank breathing down my neck." She bit her lip, words forming in her mind, an idea stirring. She'd built a career turning authenticity into something people would pay that extravagant sums for. She remembered her last major show in Paris, how critics fawned over handcrafted details that were actually machine finished. Here, real craftsmanship and heritage existed in every inch of soil, every carefully preserved seed. "You ever tried telling the story behind these?" she asked quietly. "Maybe that's what people really want to feel and connected to something genuine." Peter paused, considering. "You think folks in big cities care about the story of a purple carrot?" A small spark flared in her eyes. "Sometimes that's exactly what they care about," she responded, voice earnest. "They want to feel like they're part of something real. Maybe if you package it right, present it properly, you'll find a market that sees heirloom vegetables as a treasure instead of a novelty." He raised a brow, curiosity mingling with doubt. "You sound like you know a thing or two about branding." She simply smiled, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Let's just say I have a little experience with storytelling." A week passed, and the initial awkwardness of house guest and host began to melt into an unspoken camaraderie. Every morning, Camilla would help Peter with small tasks, collecting eggs from the chicken coop, washing produce for the local farmer's market, or even driving the old tractor under his watchful guidance. Her hair, once meticulously styled, was now frequently tied in a casual ponytail, her nails chipped from working in the dirt. In the evenings, she returned to the cottage with a new sense of purpose. She'd started sketching again, filling pages with designs inspired by the colors and textures of the farm's heirloom crops. Each vegetable variety hinted at a pattern or silhouette, reminiscent of how she once found inspiration in cathedrals or exotic foreign textiles. There was a guilt tugging at her, though she was using Peter's livelihood as a muse, and she wondered if she was overstepping. Meanwhile, Peter noticed fresh signs of life around the farm. Despite the looming foreclosure threat, he found renewed energy in seeing someone appreciate the land he loved. She asked questions about the old seeds, about soil health, about how to tell the difference between a healthy vine and one that needed pruning. In sharing these details, Peter recalled the passion that once fueled his dream to make the farm profitable in a way that honored tradition rather than chasing industrial norms. Their conversation strayed into personal territory at times. Camilla learned that Peter had lost his wife, Ellie, years ago in a car accident, and had returned from active duty only to bury her. The farm became his anchor, though it was riddled with financial storms he never anticipated. For his part, Peter learned that Camilla had built her career in Europe, gained international acclaim, and then burned out under the relentless pressure of delivering bigger, flashier collections. She was running from more than just paparazzi. She was fleeing a sense of hollowness. At night, they shared simple dinners in the farmhouse kitchen. The first time Camilla attempted cooking a vegetable casserole, it ended up slightly scorched. Peter teased her gently, but also admitted it was nice to see someone else trying to keep the kitchen alive. The lonely rooms, once echoing with silence, were starting to feel lived in again. One late evening, they settled on the porch with cups of tea, watching lightning bugs dance over the fields. The worry of foreclosure pressed heavier on Peter's mind as the calendar days kept ticking away. He had managed to sell some produce at a decent price to a local co-op, but it was peanuts compared to the bank's demand. Camilla sensed the tension. "You mentioned packaging the story of these heirloom crops," he said quietly, glancing over at her. "How exactly would someone like me do that?" I don't have a PR firm. I can't even afford to hire a photographer right now. Camilla ran her thumb around the rim of her cup. People pay for experiences, not just products, she mused. If you show them that these carrots, tomatoes, beans, whatever carry heritage, flavor, and uniqueness they can't buy at the supermarket, they'll pay a premium. Maybe collaborate with local chefs or specialty stores in the nearest city. He exhaled a long breath. Nearest city is 40 miles away, and they have grocery chains with their own suppliers. She nodded, acknowledging the reality. Then a timid smile curved her lips. What if you go beyond local? If you created an online presence, pictures, stories, maybe even a subscription service for rare heirloom produce? I've seen it work for smaller, artisanal brands. His eyes searched hers. It sounds ambitious. It is, she agreed. But if you do nothing, in 60 days, he swallowed hard, the weight returning. I lose the farm. Camilla reached out, her hand brushing his. I'm not promising miracles, but I do think we can try something different. Maybe I can help more than just cooking a scorched casserole. Their eyes locked for a moment, a silent understanding that there was risk in mixing personal empathy with business. Yet, maybe that was exactly what each of them needed. Early the next morning, Camilla placed a call from the cottage on her spotty cell reception, climbing onto a chair near the window just to find a single bar of signal. She left a voicemail for her longtime friend and assistant, Felicity Parker, who was still in Europe managing Camilla's personal brand operations. In a measured tone, she asked for help connecting with a few specialty food retailers and boutique PR contacts in the U.S. She kept details vague, not wanting to blow her cover, but Felicity would figure out the subtext. Stepping outside, Camilla spotted Peter unloading bags of feed from his truck. A short conversation later, they agreed to schedule a small tasting event, an idea Camilla had proposed. They'd invite a handful of local supporters and maybe a chef or two from the nearest decent restaurant, show off the heirloom varieties, discuss their unique stories and flavors, and hope to drum up some advanced orders or partnership offers. Peter wasn't sure who'd come, but he had nothing to lose. Camilla realized she'd have to handle logistics. Over the next few days, she tapped into every contact she could recall, bloggers who wrote about artisanal foods, a lifestyle journalist from a regional paper who'd once covered one of her fashion shows. She disguised her calls behind the identity of Camilla Addison, an aspiring culinary liaison interested in promoting local American produce. To her surprise, a few were intrigued. The notion of heirloom revival wasn't new, but combining it with a small farm in dire need struck a chord. The real challenge was hooking a credible chef. A day before the tasting, Felicity finally emailed she'd found someone named Wesley Lynn, a young chef famed for creative farm-to-table cuisine at a trendy bistro in St. Louis. Wesley had some free time and might be willing to drive down if he believed in the produce. The day of the tasting, Camilla woke up jittery. She'd arranged a few folding tables near the barn, covering them with simple white cloths. She and Peter assembled an array of produce baskets, the purple sun carrots, striped tomatoes, vibrant peppers, and the multi-hued beans. Peter's eyes shone with pride, seeing his produce displayed so beautifully, though he also looked tense. Think anyone's actually coming? He asked, scanning the empty driveway. Don't lose faith, she replied, brushing a speck of dust from one of the tablecloths. Eventually, a handful of local folks trickled in, curious neighbors, a local blogger with a camera slung over her shoulder, and a representative from the county extension office. The real test arrived when a sleek sedan pulled onto the gravel drive, from which emerged Chef Wesley Lynn, wearing a crisp shirt and an air of curiosity. He introduced himself, and Camilla introduced Peter, who offered a firm handshake, trying not to appear too eager. Wesley wasted no time diving into the produce, cutting open a variety of tomatoes, tasting them raw, taking pictures, and jotting notes. He marveled at the purple carrots, slicing them to see the colorful cross-sections, and had an almost childlike excitement when he bit into them. These flavors, so intense, Wesley murmured. You don't get this from commercial hybrids. Peter watched him sample a bit of everything, heart pounding. If a respected chef believed in his produce, that could lead to a lucrative partnership. Meanwhile, Camilla hovered, quietly explaining the history of each variety with a passion that surprised even herself. She spoke of the seeds passed down through Peter's family, the unpredictable beauty of stripes and spirals on the vegetables. For a moment, she felt the same thrill she once had, unveiling a bold new fashion line, only this time, the material was grown from soil. After an hour of tasting and conversation, Wesley placed a hand on Peter's shoulder. I want to feature your produce for a pop-up event in St. Louis, he said. The farm-to-table crowd will love these stories, these flavors. He mentioned a preliminary order, enough to bring in some revenue. While not huge, it was a beginning. Peter looked stunned, as if a lifeline had been thrown his way. When the tasting wound down and the last guest left, Camilla shared a triumphant smile with Peter. She saw renewed hope in his eyes, even if it was just a flicker. They still had a long road to go, but at least they'd taken a step together. Bolstered by the modest success of the tasting, Camilla dove deeper into ideas for boosting the farm's profile. Chef Wesley Lynn's pop-up event was scheduled in a couple of weeks, and that gave them a short time frame to prepare a sufficient supply of heirloom produce for transport. They also needed professional packaging, something that would stand out in a crowded culinary market. Peter had reservations. Packaging alone could be expensive, and the bank's deadline drew closer each day. But Camilla insisted that they had to elevate the perceived value of the produce. With a marketing push, they could charge premium prices that might actually cover the debt. So they turned the dusty barn into a makeshift studio. Large wooden planks were set up as a table to experiment with different labels, baskets, and color schemes. Camilla had an artistic eye for color and design, transferring skills from runway presentations to vegetable branding. One afternoon, she decided to photograph the produce for a small catalog or brochure. She borrowed Peter's old digital camera, nothing fancy, but workable. Under the barn's skylight, the tomatoes glistened in natural sunlight, their stripes reminiscent of tie-dye patterns. The carrots and beans, laid out in neat rows, appeared like a painter's palette. At first, the pictures looked amateurish, but through trial and error, Camilla captured some striking shots that showcased the produce's uniqueness. Peter watched from a distance, arms crossed. He was unused to the concept that carrots and tomatoes could be treated like high-end couture. Yet, as he observed Camilla fuss over lighting, repositioning leaves for better composition, he felt a stirring in his chest. She was breathing new life into a place he'd once feared was beyond saving. One evening, after hours of trial runs, Camilla wiped her brow and sank onto a stool. I think we have enough decent photos to make a small brochure, she announced, flipping through the camera's gallery. We'll add some short stories about the seeds, how they came into your family, your growing methods, that kind of narrative. Peter offered a hesitant nod. And you think people will actually read it? She smiled, a mix of patience and conviction. You'd be surprised how hungry people are for authenticity. They see processed, soulless products everywhere. An heirloom tomato with a story about your grandma's seeds is more than just a tomato, it's a piece of heritage. He touched the edge of one photograph, where the swirl of purple and orange in a carrot looked almost unreal. I guess I never thought about it that way. Always seemed normal to me. What else would we grow besides the seeds my family left behind? Camilla set the camera aside. That's the beauty of it, she said softly. What you consider normal can be extraordinary to someone else. We just need to help them see it. They ended the night in the farmhouse, poring over packaging estimates and shipping logistics. Between the cost of custom-printed labels, special containers, and the labor involved in sorting and boxing produce, the numbers were daunting. But if Chef Wesley Lynn's pop-up event went well, it might spark more demand. They could possibly pay off a chunk of the debt, proving to the bank that the farm had a viable future. At a particularly tense moment, Peter sighed, resting his forehead in his hands. What if this doesn't work, Camilla? I appreciate everything you're doing, but I keep thinking, what if we're just delaying the inevitable? She reached over, resting a gentle hand on his forearm. I can't promise success, she admitted, but I've seen miracles happen when something is truly special. Your farm is special. These seeds are special. We have to try. He looked at her, truly looked, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. All right, he said at last. Let's give it all we've got. As the clock ticked down toward the pop-up event, the flurry of activity on the farm escalated. Labeled crates needed assembling, produce had to be harvested at just the right ripeness, and shipping methods confirmed to keep everything fresh. Camilla found herself taking calls from Felicity in Europe at odd hours, coordinating deliveries of small, custom label prints that had to be rushed across the ocean. Meanwhile, Peter scrambled to ensure the harvest was on schedule, enlisting the help of a few local teens who were glad to earn extra money. Amid the chaos, an unexpected visitor arrived one bright afternoon. Camilla spotted a sleek black SUV pulling into the driveway. Out stepped a well-dressed woman in her 50s, carrying a handbag that screamed designer label. The visitor introduced herself as Dorothy Owens, a representative of the bank that held Peter's loan. She strode across the yard, eyes scanning the surroundings with a polite but clinical detachment. Peter met her by the barn, forcibly polite. He apologized for the state of disarray. Bins and boxes cluttered every corner. Dorothy just nodded, her gaze lingering on the scribbled checklists pinned to a board. I came to see how the farm's prospects are shaping up, she explained. We're aware you have about 4 weeks left on the notice. Camilla, standing nearby, felt tension coil inside her. Dorothy's presence was a stark reminder that time was running out. She watched Peter muster his composure as he outlined the new business strategy, the collaboration with a rising star chef, the specialized packaging, the plan to tap into the higher-end market. Dorothy listened, face unreadable. I admire the effort, she said, flipping through some of the brochures Camilla had designed. But do you have confirmed purchase orders or any cash coming in soon? The bank is obligated to proceed if there's no evidence of solvency. Peter's jaw tightened. The pop-up event is in 2 weeks, he said. Chef Wesley Lynn is featuring our produce. We're expecting strong sales. Dorothy's brow rose in mild skepticism. If you can provide documented proof of significant revenue, we may reconsider the foreclosure timeline, but it needs to be more than promise. She turned a cool gaze to Camilla, as if registering the presence of an outsider. And you are. Camilla stepped forward, lifting her chin. I'm helping with the marketing and brand strategy. My background is in high-level product presentation. Dorothy gave a practiced smile. Well, Miss Addison, I hope your strategies work. We'll be in touch. With that, Dorothy Owens left, the SUV's tires crunching on the gravel. Peter stood there, fists clenched at his sides. Camilla placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't let her rattle you, she advised gently. He exhaled sharply. I'm not rattled, just frustrated. She talked about the farm like it's a failing corporation to be repossessed. Camilla understood. You've worked all your life here, and they reduce it to numbers on a balance sheet. He nodded, face taut. Yeah, well, this plan of ours better work. If it doesn't, the bank will be the proud owner of my grandfather's legacy. Refusing to let despair settle, Camilla refocused. One step at a time, she said, let's get everything ready for the pop-up. We'll make it a success. You'll see. Yet, that night, as they finalized the crates for shipping, both wore the weight of Dorothy's unspoken threat. A single event had to generate the kind of revenue that would convince the bank not to call the loan a near impossible challenge. Still, they had no choice. It was do or die for Caldwell Farm, and neither Peter nor Camilla was prepared to watch it crumble without a fight. At last, the day of the Louis pop-up arrived. A caravan of 2 trucks, one driven by Peter and another by one of his teenage helpers, rolled out before dawn, each laden with carefully packed heirloom produce. Camilla followed in her repaired sedan, which Bill had managed to fix just in time. The journey was tense. Farmland gave way to highways. Highways led to city streets, and soon they were navigating crowded urban blocks that made the farm feel like a distant dream. Chef Wesley Lynn's bistro was a small, modern space with glass-paneled walls overlooking a bustling street. The pop-up, he explained, would transform the space for a single evening into an immersive farm-to-table experience. Tickets had sold out within days, partly due to Wesley's reputation and partly due to the novelty of rare heirloom vegetables from Willow Bend. Camilla, wearing a simple black blouse and slacks, jumped into action upon arrival. She and Peter unloaded boxes of carrots, beans, tomatoes, peppers, each labeled with a story of its heritage. The bistro's staff marveled at the colors. Cameras flashed as local food bloggers and a small TV crew hovered, capturing the setup. Though he tried to hide it, Peter was visibly anxious. He'd rarely set foot in a bustling city restaurant, let alone pinned his financial hopes on one. As the event began, guests filtered in food critics, influencers, curious locals. Wesley introduced the menu, a series of dishes each featuring one of Caldwell Farms' vegetables. Between courses, there were short presentations about the history of each variety, often led by Camilla, who spoke with poised clarity reminiscent of her days commanding a fashion runway. The purple sun carrot, ladies and gentlemen, is not just a colorful novelty, she explained, gesturing to a plated appetizer. Its lineage dates back generations in Peter Caldwell's family. The flavor you taste reflects decades of careful cultivation. It's both produce and living history. Peter watched, astounded by how elegantly she spun the narrative. She had the crowd eating up every word, along with each vibrant dish. When he stepped up to talk about his grandfather's seeds, his voice trembled at first, but the sincere passion in his eyes soon won them over. The story of a small farm's fight to preserve heritage struck a chord with diners weary of mass-market everything. As plates were cleared and replaced with new culinary inventions, guests scribbled notes, snapped photos, and posted on social media in real time. The fervor of interest grew. Some asked if they could buy produce directly after the event. Others wanted to visit Caldwell Farm. By the end of the night, Wesley stood up to applause. A big thank you to Peter Caldwell and Camilla Addison for bringing these remarkable heirlooms to us. Tonight's special produce boxes are available at the front if you want to take some of this farm experience home. The wave of hungry interest that followed both relieved and overwhelmed them. Nearly all the boxes sold out. People were paying top dollar, some even tipping extra, enthralled by the authenticity and flavor. A local specialty grocer approached Peter, discussing a trial order. A high-end restaurant manager left his card, proposing a collaboration. Camilla discreetly tallied the sales, her heart pounding. This might actually be enough to impress the bank. When the pop-up wound down near midnight, the bistro staff helped them pack up the few leftover crates. Wesley Lynn shook Peter's hand vigorously. That was one of the most gratifying menus I've served. Let's do it again soon. Peter nodded, speechless with gratitude. A swirl of relief, excitement, and exhaustion filled him. Camilla, also drained, leaned against the bar with a glass of water, her face flushed with triumph. She locked eyes with Peter across the room, offering a small nod that seemed to say, "We did it." They headed back to their vehicles, the noise of the city still humming around them. For the first time in months, Peter felt genuine hope. He placed the night's receipts into a secure bag, glancing at Camilla, who wore a tired but glowing smile. "You're amazing," he said quietly. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." She reached out, briefly touching his arm. "You could have, maybe not in the same way, but the passion was yours. I just helped polish the story." In that moment, standing under the neon lights of a city far from the quiet fields, they both understood that this partnership had grown deeper roots than either expected. Within days, the bank's local branch was flooded with chatter about Caldwell Farms' sudden success. Dorothy Owens, somewhat skeptical, arranged another visit to go over the sales figures. This time, Peter and Camilla were ready, presenting purchase orders from 2 restaurants and a specialty grocer, along with receipts from the pop-up event. The numbers indicated a new revenue stream that could chip away at the overdue debt. "Impressive," Dorothy acknowledged, adjusting her glasses as she inspected the documents. "This may persuade the regional manager to reconsider foreclosure proceedings. However, I'll need a formal proposal for how you plan to maintain this income over the next year." Peter inhaled. We're working on a subscription model for monthly heirloom produce boxes, plus seasonal pop-up events. With the branding Camilla and I developed, we can sell at a higher margin. We also have a potential partnership for online sales. Dorothy took notes. Though she remained businesslike, Peter sensed less hostility than before. Submit your projections within a week, she said. If it's viable, we can negotiate an extension. After she left, Peter and Camilla celebrated quietly in the living room. The house felt more alive, with fresh flowers on the table and a sense of optimism in the air. Mugs of coffee in hand, they discussed the next steps. Felicity, Camilla's assistant, had been working wonders in the background. She'd connected them with a few e-commerce platforms that specialized in artisanal products. Soon, Caldwell Farm might have an online storefront, complete with Camilla's photographs and storytelling. It was an unprecedented pivot for a small-town operation. But times were changing. Their rapport grew stronger with each passing day. Camilla found herself confiding in Peter about her past, her meteoric rise in the fashion world, the constant pressure to outdo herself, the false friends who turned on her the moment trends shifted. She explained how she'd begun to loathe her own designs, feeling they lacked substance and were purely commercial vehicles. Peter confided too. He spoke of the guilt he carried over Ellie's death, how he was deployed at the time and unable to be by her side after the accident. How, upon returning, he vowed to save the farm as a way to honor the memory of their shared dreams. The bank notice was a betrayal to him, a sign that maybe he'd failed at preserving the life he once imagined. These honest conversations wove them closer together. The tension that had flared during their first meeting was replaced by a simmering connection, one that went beyond gratitude. Sometimes, Camilla caught Peter's gaze lingering on her, and she felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't naive. Relationships were complicated, especially ones built amid crisis. But the quiet strength of this man, his unwavering determination, touched a part of her that had lain dormant for too long. Meanwhile, the farm thrived on the new attention. Local teens came by after school to help with labeling produce boxes, enthralled by the sudden notion that Willow Bend could be famous for something. Even the diner included a small section on the menu, Caldwell heirloom salad. One afternoon, as Camilla arranged a shipment of produce, she paused to look out the window at the fields. She felt the creative spark inside her, not just for produce branding, but for designing again. Maybe, she mused, there was a middle ground between high fashion and the authenticity she'd found here. She retrieved her sketchbook, flipping through pages of farmland-inspired designs. A bold idea took root. What if she developed a small capsule collection inspired by the shapes and colors of these heirloom crops, a statement about sustainability, artistry, and heritage? But that would be a conversation for another day. Right now, the priority was saving Caldwell Farm. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was underway, that the synergy between them was leading to a grander vision than either had dared dream. 2 weeks later, the dust settled on frantic shipments, bank proposals, and anxious waiting. Dorothy Owens finally returned with official paperwork in hand. The regional manager has reviewed your documents and found a path forward, she declared. Peter and Camilla stood across from her at the farmhouse table, hearts pounding in unison. We're offering a 6-month extension to refinance, contingent on proof of continued sales growth. Relief coursed through them. 6 months was time to solidify the new business model, time to expand distribution, and time to establish Caldwell Farm as a recognized source for premium heirloom produce. Peter signed the new agreement, his hand trembling slightly. When Dorothy left, Camilla jumped to her feet and threw her arms around him in spontaneous joy. For a moment, they simply held on, the weight of fear dissolving into a flood of possibility. Shortly after, Camilla returned to the cottage. She'd been living there for almost a month, far longer than she originally anticipated. The place that once felt like a temporary refuge now felt like a home. She sat at the small table, flipping through her designs. The pages showed evolving sketches, dresses with subtle prints, inspired by the swirling stripes on tomatoes. Jackets dyed in gradients reminiscent of purple to orange carrots, and accessories that echoed the shapes of bean pods. Each piece was a love letter to the farm. Felicity called again, pushing for Camilla to return to Europe for an upcoming fashion week. The board was restless. Rumors circulated about her sabbatical. Camilla hesitated, eyeing the farmland outside the window. She realized she didn't want to go back to business as usual. Something fundamental had shifted in her. That evening, she and Peter climbed into his truck for a quiet drive through the fields. The summer light stretched long shadows across the land. Row after row of crops swayed in a gentle breeze. Camilla rolled down the window, letting the warm air wash over her face. "Where do we go from here?" Peter asked, voice subdued. She turned to him. "We keep building on what we started. Now that the bank's eased up, we can plan beyond survival." He nodded, as though contemplating more than just the financial future. "What about you?" he asked, softly. "Your life is in Europe. Fashion weeks, and big contracts. Are you heading back?" She let the silence linger, feeling the truth resonate in her chest. "I'll have to, at least to settle things," she admitted. "But I'm not the same person who left Paris. I don't want to churn out empty designs anymore." He stopped the truck near a small ridge where they could gaze over the valley. Stars began to glimmer overhead. "You could do anything," he said, turning off the engine. "People follow you, admire you. You could incorporate this place into your work somehow." She smiled, tears threatening. "That's exactly what I'm thinking. A line inspired by the farm, these heirlooms. The story. But I want to be sure it's done right, in a way that respects what you and your family built." He reached for her hand, warmth and callous sincerity in his touch. "I trust you, more than I trust anyone else in a long while." They sat in the stillness, the farm stretching infinitely around them. Tomorrow held 1,000 uncertainties, but also 1,000 promises. Peter Caldwell's livelihood had been saved, at least for now. Camilla Addison's artistic flame had been rekindled in the most unlikely of places. Their partnership, once born of desperation, had blossomed into something far richer, a shared dream to merge the authenticity of rural heritage with the creativity of high design. She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the night air. The future, though uncertain, was theirs to shape. And under that star-laced sky, they silently vowed to do just that together. This remarkable story is more than just the triumph of an underdog farmer and a glamorous fashion designer. It's a powerful reminder that courage, authenticity, and good old-fashioned American perseverance can overcome even the toughest odds. Peter and Camilla proved that no battle is unwinnable when fought with heart, honor, and a willingness to take chances. Their journey resonates deeply with all of us who believe in community, heritage, and the strength of hardworking people determined to protect what matters most. Now, it's your turn. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of Peter and Camilla's story inspired you the most. Have you faced a similar fight to preserve your family's legacy? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell. We've got more incredible stories coming your way soon. Thanks for watching. Stay strong and keep fighting for what you believe in.